I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'll call this meeting of the January 2020, thank you. I now call this meeting of the January 2024 Board of 23? Yeah, okay. 23 Board of Adjustment to, okay.
Next year's meeting.
Yeah. This board sits as a citizen volunteer board, and each year we elect new officers at this January meeting. So our next item of business is going to be to nominate and have the board elect the chairman for this coming year and the vice chairman. So with that said, I guess I'm calling for nominations for chair.
I'll make a nomination. I will nominate Dale Rhodes for chair and Bill Huffman for vice chair.
I will second Dale Rhodes. I can't second myself.
I'll second the vice chair.
All right. We have a nomination of Dale Rhodes for chair and Bill Huffman for vice chair. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll declare nominations closed. All in favor of Dale Rhodes assuming the chairmanship of the board, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those wishing Bill Huffman to be vice chairman of the board, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. With that bit of business being done, do you want to switch chairs, Dale? or-
Now we can stay where we are.
All right. There you go, sir.
We don't use that very often.
That's a pretty,
All right. Mr. Bodie from the Planning and Development Office, please describe the function and operation of the board adjustments to our applicants in the audience.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body established by the Board of County Commissioners under Chapter 62, Article 2, Division 4 of the Brevard County Code. The Board of Adjustment is empowered to hear requests for variances to the zoning regulations and sign regulation in Chapter 62, Article 6, and Article 9. Pursuant to the Florida Rules of Appellate Procedure, any person or persons jointly or severally aggrieved by any decision of the Board of Adjustment may, within 30 days after the date the order is signed, apply to a court of competent jurisdiction for appropriate relief. Mr. Chairman, you have 5 items on your agenda today.
Thank you, sir. Would Mr. Huffman please explain to the applicants in the audience the definition of a hardship?
by regulatory definition, a variance may be granted. By regulatory definition, an undue hardship. A variance may be granted when it will not be contrary to the public interest and where, owing to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the provisions of this chapter will result in unnecessary and undue hardship. The term, quote, undue hardship, has a specific legal definition in this context and essentially means that without the requested variance, the applicant will have no reasonable use of the subject property under the existing development regulations. Personal medical reasons shall not be considered as grounds for establishing an undue hardship, sufficient to qualify an applicant for a variance. Economic reasons may be considered only in instances where the landowner cannot yield reasonable use and/or a reasonable return under the existing land development regulations. An applicant must answer a variance hardship worksheet with 6 questions. The Board of Adjustments will discuss these questions today with each applicant who has requested a variance.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to address our board members, the applicants, and the audience for a moment. The Board of Adjustments, as a quasi-judicial board with members appointed by the Brevard County Board of Commissioners, will utilize Robert's rules to conduct our meetings. The chair is asking all board members not to ask any questions while the applicants are making their presentations. Once the applicants have completed their presentation, we'll begin with board questioning with the board member who represents the applicant's district. When concluded, questioning is open to the full board. The chair will recognize each board member. Once all board members have completed their questioning, we will then open it to the audience who may be here to speak concerning the applicant's application. Anyone from the audience wishing to speak will be given the opportunity to address the board, but only once. At the conclusion of public comment, the applicant will be given additional time for rebuttal as well as to present their final comments. Once completed, no further comment will be heard from the applicant or the public. We will not use a timer for this meeting. Instead, we're asking each speaker to be concise in what they have to say. It is important that you stay on the subject and avoid information that is not relevant. All persons speaking must provide their name and address for the public record. Those wishing not to verbally state their address may ask the clerk at the podium for an address card and fill it out and return it to the clerk. Are there any questions from the board members about the chair procedures? Any questions from the applicants about the chair procedures? Are there any questions from the audience about the chair procedures? Seeing none, then our next order of business is to approve the minutes from last meeting. Are there any additions or correction to those minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes from last month.
I'll second that.
We have a motion to approve and we have a second to approve the meetings from last month. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And they are approved. Mr. Bodie, may we please have the first applicant that is requesting a variance?
Yes, item number 1, Susan E. Rice, request variance of Chapter 62, Article 6, Brevard County Code as follows. Variance number 1, Section 62-2109A, to permit a variance of 6.3 feet over the maximum 6 feet height limitation for a 306-foot-long retaining wall along the north property line. Variance number 2, Section 62-2109A, to permit a variance of 5 feet over the maximum 6-foot height limitation for a 163-foot-long retaining wall along the south property line in an SEU suburban estate zoning classification located in District 2.
Would the applicant please come to the podium? And if you speak into the microphone, please, your name and address for the record.
Howard Benziger, and my address is 996 Harbor Point Drive, Rockledge, Florida.
Ma'am, would you please step to the microphone? Your name and
Hello.
address.
Susan Rice. Can
Your
you
ad-
hear it?
Yes, your address.
5995 South Tropical Trail.
Okay. Please raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm the evidence that you're about to give this Board of Adjustments is the truth?
Yes.
How may we help you?
Well, we're looking for the variance on the wall. To give you some background, we
Hang on. When you moved it, it stopped. It's not
still not
working.
working.
There you go.
Yeah, okay, is that better?
There we
Okay. We submitted the engineered drawings for the retaining wall with Brevard County. The wall was submitted at 8 feet high with no railing on the wall. The drawing was approved and we constructed. Now, this is all coming after the fact that a neighbor complained about the wall height, and now we're being asked to lower the wall, but it was already approved, inspected, and all the drawings had turned in and everything, so that's what the hardship is. So it's kind of like going backwards instead of forward. The height of the house is 2 feet lower than the road that it fronts on. It is only 3 feet higher than the residence to the north on finished floor level. And there's, on the north property line, there's some severe drainage issues on that parcel. It all drains to their parcel, the parcel that I'm working on. So that's it kind of in a nutshell. We have photographs showing the water problems. We have the drawing shows that it was approved by Brevard County for construction, 8 feet high without a railing. We don't mind putting the railing in, but it's like they're saying, oh, now you're way too high. But it was submitted and built to the county specs, the approved drawings that were submitted.
Okay. All right.
I might have a solution. I'm not opposed to moving the fence in on the property line or the railing so that the wall stays existing height, and then I'll plant hedges behind it if I'm forced to put the railing.
Okay. You're in District 2, Mr. Hartman.
Mr. Chair, can I just interject for a second? I just want to clarify so you guys understand what happened.
Please.
As far as I understand, the applicant submitted a building permit for a single-family home. Part of the revisions, it was included with the retaining wall. Zoning was not included in that review, that the wall was not approved by zoning. It was caught after the fact. So that's how the wall was found out. It was an after the fact that was added to an existing building permit.
Okay. So the wall, I'm sorry, I'm just a little confused. The wall was added after the permits of the house were built?
It was added during the review of that permit for the house.
Okay. And did that permit get approved with the wall added to that?
It was, yes. I will tell you that zoning was not part of that review. Zoning reviews the height of the walls, so that's why it was missed.
Okay. Why was zoning not a part of that review? Do we know?
It's just one of those operational snafus that I would tell you that when it came in, it was for one thing and not understanding what was added to the permit, and it was just missed.
Okay. And then what is the railing that they're now talking about? They're being required to put a railing on?
Yeah, I believe it's part of the building code that when you're over a certain height for the wall, that you're required to have a railing to prevent people from falling over that because of the height of the wall.
And it would have to be on the wall itself, right?
Correct.
It couldn't be inside the
My
wall,
understanding, but that's a
etc.
building code concern.
Okay. All right.
Good afternoon. How are you? How are you? I did have the opportunity to visit the property and take a look at what's going on. It's a little complicated and a little confusing, but if you don't mind bearing with me, I'd like to ask a few more questions just
Sure.
to get clarification on it. You're talking about the 8-foot wall on variance request number 1.
Is it north or south?
I don't,
The south wall is the one we had our neighbor complain about.
we have
The northern wall.
2 variance requests, one for a wall along the north property line and one for a wall along the south property line. So the one that's, that was in the permit approval was the one on the south property line or the north property line?
Well, we were going to use that same wall on the north and south property lines, but when we did it on the south property line, the subcontractor wasn't available, then we had to change it to block and do a different engineering design so that we could have just a regular standard block wall made, retaining wall, rather than a solid concrete pour wall.
So what are they now? What's the difference?
The south wall is a solid concrete pour wall, and that was the one that was submitted and approved and inspected and approved at 8 foot high with no railing. And then we just duplicated that on the south, but we changed it to a block wall. But it ended up being 9'4" to be about the same height as the other wall on the other side because it was so low on the property, because we were right next to a ditch on the north property line.
The north property line requests a variance of 6.3 feet over the maximum 6 foot height. So is that wall then 12.3 feet?
Well, the wall itself is 9'4", and they're adding the railing as an additional 3 feet on top of that. So, but like I'm saying, the drawing was approved at 8 feet with no railing, so we don't have a problem putting the railing in. It's the problem to say now the wall's too high after that was approved drawing.
So on both these variance requests, they're asking to put a 3 foot railing in, and that's going to
Yeah.
extend the height of the wall an extra 3
Correct.
feet. And that's for safety reasons?
That's for safety reasons, yes.
There's some drainage issues in that neighborhood?
Well, the property to the north, the entire parcel drains south, which is to our property. So all the water piles up against this property, against that wall. So in order for the wall to be even on the left and the right, we had to raise the wall up a little bit because on on the north side, we border a ditch. So the wall actually is the same height as the other side, but it looks larger because of the ditch that they're measuring from in a ditch rather than with level ground.
I submitted a survey with that ditch.
I'm sorry, closer to the mic, please.
I submitted a survey with that ditch noted on that survey.
To construct the house, did you bring in a lot of fill to raise the house up?
Well, the property originally was at least 5 to 6 feet higher existing than the property to the north.
Right,
So it was already higher before we did anything to the property.
but you did bring some fill in
Yes.
to raise the house up. And the house is right on the Indian River, right on the lagoon.
Right.
So I don't have an issue with that. I was just
Yeah.
curious. The house is higher than the rest of the property.
Oh, yeah.
So stormwater is going to run from the house out in all directions.
Well, we had,
It's-
the improved drainage plan that we gave them has everything running away from the river
Mm-hmm.
to the front, and then
Right.
it disperses out the front.
But where I'm getting at is the walls will actually serve to keep your stormwater off of your neighbor's properties.
That is correct. That's one of the main reasons, to stabilize the fill and to keep the water from running off the sides.
All right, I don't have any more questions.
Sir?
Yeah, I have questions. I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. Couple things. Let's continue with the drainage discussion. This looks like for north, this looks like the Indian River. This looks like the Indian River Lagoon is to the left on this drawing, and the drainage arrows show the water going away from the Indian River Lagoon to the right, to the east.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at the drawing, I got the water running south. It picks up a 6-inch pipe, which then takes it from the swell in the back and brings it forward along by the septic system. So that's what drains it. It's a 6-inch pipe that drains the backyard, so it does not go into the Indian River.
So where's it go?
It goes to the front property. The front property is like, several hundred feet long.
And where's it go from the front property? I see there's a pond here. Does
There's
it go to the
a pond on the property.
Okay, so everything drains from your property out to this pond, not into the river. Okay, that's one. So you're holding your water on your property.
All the water is on my property.
Now, you said the north property, the water was draining to the south towards your property, and then
Correct.
there's an intervening ditch.
If you look at the survey, it shows a ditch that runs down that whole side against that retaining wall.
Right, and then that also goes to the pond then?
No, that goes to the river.
That
So
is,
that one drains back to the river?
yeah, that's on the other parcel. We're not in control of that.
Yeah. So I also heard you talk about concrete and CMU, the masonry wall. Which one has the concrete wall, north or south?
The south wall is a solid concrete pour wall. We tried to use that same contractor for the north wall, but he wasn't available, and it was too long of time schedule. So then we converted an engineered drawing to a block wall and built it as a block wall.
And that was re-permitted through the building department?
That was, yeah, the plans were submitted to the building
Okay.
department.
We don't have a copy of the
Yeah, they was all
engineered
submitted
drawing.
with you.
That's fine. We don't have a copy of, is your concrete wall, is that a gravity wall that just has an angle coming down? Or is it a wall with a foot that goes underneath the fill?
The footer's like 4.5 foot wide,
Mm-hmm.
and then the wall's sitting on that footer.
It has baffles.
So it just like a normal wall,
It's a normal.
has a balanced footer? and
Well,
it-
it sits on the outside edge of it so that the dirt stays down so the wall can't roll.
That's what I'm talking about, an
Right.
L-type
L-type, yes.
wall that the dirt, okay. And then on the north side with the CMU wall,
It's the same.
okay. How is that CMU wall grouted solid with rebar? How do you?
Solid with rebar.
Okay, with bents into the footer,
Yes, rebar into the footer,
into the footer.
correct.
Okay,
And it has
Tedman.
Deadman columns that are 16 by 16 columns that are built into the wall. And from that, there's deadmen that come off of that to secure it even more.
earth tiebacks.
It's like
similar to
a steel,
that. Yeah, rods.
metal rods that come into another footer that's
Okay.
off on like a 60-degree angle.
So on your finished grade, you say the wall holds your water. So what is it, about a foot higher than finished grade, top of wall?
And we lowered the grade as best we could on the outside, so it's below the slab by at least 1.5 feet, if not 2 foot.
Okay, but in order to retain the water on your property, that wall is a little bit higher than.
Yes, that is correct on both sides. And the other thing is that the garage comes out on that north side is where they drive. Their driveway is a side load garage. And the wall's up high enough to provide a curb stop so the car cannot go over the wall.
Define high enough, inches, feet?
It's about 8 inches
Okay,
high so that the tire cannot go up and over.
okay.
You know.
And if you have to put a railing on that wall, the bumper will stop it before the wheels ever get there?
Oh, yeah.
That's the idea,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. And what's there's a railing that has to be anchored to the top of this wall? And how high is the railing?
3 foot standard like hand railing, like you would see in a residential balcony,
Okay,
just an aluminum rail.
okay. I'm used to roadway construction, so they're usually a little bigger. But as long as they meet residential code.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
You did the change to a block wall instead of concrete, and you submitted that and got it approved, is that correct?
Yes, I had submitted those drawings.
At what height did you submit that?
We submitted it at 8 foot, but when we built it, it was actually at 9.4, so we 16 inches higher.
How did we exceed, because you were approved for 8 foot, how did we end up exceeding 8 foot and going to 9 foot?
It's to try to get the wall up higher to stop the car with the curb.
Did you make any submissions to planning in regards to increasing the height of that wall from 8 foot to 9 foot?
Well, when this all came about afterwards, then they asked me to get the drawing at the 9.4 engineered height, which we did submit.
But you'd already built it at 9.4,
We already built it at 9.4.
but you were only approved for 8.
Correct.
Okay, so who took it upon themselves to decide, I'm going a foot over what I'm approved for?
Well, it got past us. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Because they were trying to get it up high enough to stop the car.
Did you know it was going to 9 foot?
I didn't know until after the fact.
Okay. Did the contractor know you were only approved for 8 foot?
I am the contractor, and it was
You're the
approved.
contractor,
Yes.
so you built the wall.
Yeah, I had
Okay.
the masons go out there, but when they ran it higher.
So I would assume, since you're the contractor,
Yeah.
the questioning changes a little bit,
Yeah.
that you're checking to see what your height is, and it's kind of challenging to say, oops, I missed it by 1.5 feet. You should know what your height is going to be, should you not?
Well, the answer to that question in a roundabout way is we're up against a ditch. So we're
Right.
measuring it from the bottom of a ditch rather than it on an established grade. And it's like when you have one property, it's 5 to 6 feet higher than the property next to you. What are you measuring from? If you measure it from the outside, the bottom of that ditch, it's 9.4. But on the other side, we were 5, 6 feet higher, so that's
But
where the problem
it's-
is.
Well, the problem is that you measure off of your property, not the neighboring property. So, as a contractor, you've got to know that. And
Right.
you've got to know what your height is going to be, do you not?
But the wall's not on the property line.
My,
Oh, sorry.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that. Let me ask a question. Gentlemen, I don't know who this goes to, so forgive me here. If the wall's at 8 foot instead of 9, does that railing still come into play?
That railing would be up to the building department that wanted it on there for the safety because of the height of the driveway, to make sure that somebody wouldn't fall over it.
Okay.
Whenever we're looking at the height, you were wondering about that. The code states that the height of fences on property lines or parallel to property lines shall be measured from the lowest grade of either side of the property line. So
Okay.
that's one of the reasons he was saying that there's such a difference in height.
But my question is, if it were at 8 feet instead of the 9 feet that he ended up going to, would the 8 feet still require the railing on top?
I think it would, because it's required on the, is it required on the south side? Are you putting one on the south side?
If the way the code reads, anything over 30 inches high, you got to have a railing. So just 30 inches requires that railing to be there.
Okay. So then my next question, he submitted a second plan with a revision to the wall, and it got approved at 8 foot as well?
Again, there was a building permit that was submitted. In the part of that review, a revision was added for the walls. Anything over 6 feet requires a variance. So that was missed on the revision. I wouldn't say that the height of the wall was approved at 8 feet because zoning review was not turned on at the time. It wasn't only after the fact that we were notified that the plans included a retaining wall on both the south and north sides of the property. Hence, that's why we are here today, and the applicant is requesting a variances.
But when he submitted the plans with the fences as part of it and also a revision later, correct?
My understanding that initially, with the first submittal, it did not.
Okay. And so then the revision came in and nobody caught the revision.
Correct.
Okay. That makes it all kinds of complicated, doesn't
I
it?
have the approved drawings here at 8 feet if you need it.
No, that's okay. I don't need that. Yeah, I take your word that it was approved at 8 feet. What we're hearing, and the reason I'm being very emphatic about this is it's one thing if you go out and build a wall without any approvals. It's quite another if you're given approvals and build it. But then when you make changes to what you're approved on, then that brings in the third complication.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm looking at and what I'm weighing in my mind as I'm discussing this, and thus the questions that I'm asking. So I just want you to understand what I'm looking at here as I'm going through this. So you didn't go back and get it approved at 9 feet when you made that change?
We, once it was caught that it was at 9 rather than 8, then I
That's
turned
what
in,
triggered this.
it was actually triggered before this. So,
Okay.
and then, but they asked me to give them the drawing at 9/4,
Okay.
so I did.
Okay.
But it was
Well, yeah,
after.
yeah, you would have to.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, gentlemen? Yes, sir.
What type of railing are you putting on top of this?
It's
Is it
just
going to be
gonna
a
be
tube
like
aluminum or?
Aluminum picket rail like you would see on any residential house, like on a
lawn
balcony
fence?
railing or anything. It's just an aluminum picket rail.
For a length of like 300 feet and 100 feet?
Well, the way the code reads, if the dirt drops below 36 inches of the concrete wall, then you certainly don't need it anymore, because now you got 3-foot high wall because the dirt is protruding down, but the wall's staying level. So, but wherever the wall is not 36 inches high, you got to have the railing to that point. So it may not be the entire length of the wall, but once the wall and the dirt start getting below 3 feet, now the wall becomes the actual railing. So you can't fall over. It's 36 inches high.
Okay. I don't know if there's it has nothing to do with variance, but as far as code, the sturdiness of that railing is something I would be concerned about.
How about pylons?
I can't design it for you, I'm just
Stuck
saying.
No,
pylons in there.
it's by a contractor, that's all they do is railings.
So how wide is the top of the wall?
8 inches.
8 inches. So are you going to embed the posts?
No, what they do is they have the anchors. They got stainless steel wedge anchors that they put in.
A plate with four,
Yeah, it's kind of like on a condominium, when you see the railing and it bolts
Plate
down the
with
floor.
two.
Yeah, it's got like a plate and it has 4 holes in it that they put the wedge anchors in.
okay. That's a building code problem, just something I'm curious about, as far as the strength for the
Yes,
safety
the strength will
reason.
be there. The side pressure, I think, is 50 pounds per lineal foot.
Mhm. Okay.
All right, I'm going to ask you to stand to the side for just a minute. And if somebody comes up, you can be seated. But is there anyone here in the audience that'd like to speak in favor or opposition? Please come forward. Guys, just go ahead and have a seat, would you please? Please state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon, Chairman and gentlemen. My name is Binay Kumar, Vinaykumar. Address is 145 Sanderling Run, Merritt Island, Florida.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give this Board of Adjustments is the truth?
Truth and whole truth.
Are you in favor or opposition, sir?
In opposition.
Okay, please state your case.
So, I know you heard the story. To correct some of the misrepresentations, to begin with, there is no difference real between the two properties. They filled the property with around 240 loads of dirt. This is the statement by the contractor when we were initially talking to them. As you see in their approval, it is built at about a 6 feet height above the height. I mean, no other houses in Merritt Island probably built at that height. So they built so much dirt, now they had to retain the dirt, that's why they had to build the wall. When they built the wall on the north side of the property, we were kind of surprised. One morning we woke up and there's a huge wall going up. To give you a perspective, I go out of my garage, my kids play, we're staring at a Berlin Wall like that, right next to me. It's about that height. And it's about 300 feet. It's not even like a 10-foot wall. You're talking about a 12-foot nearly, going 300 feet across my property on the south side. That's what I look at. So that's obviously unsightly. I spoke to the code enforcement. I mean, we wanted to be good neighbors, and they have been building this since 2000. This is a 3-year project. So the wall came up, I talked to the code enforcement. They came, this is what the code enforcement told me, that they don't have a permission above 6 foot. They should not even be building this. And then it's about a year back. And then we contacted the code enforcement, then they said there will be a variance request. So structurally to look at, I'm looking at this wall outside my garage, at this height of a wall for 300 feet. And we all buy property on the river with the intention that we'll be enjoying the river. Part of the river view is blocked from wherever I'm standing because I'm staring at a wall. Conveniently, I misrepresented. There is no ditch there. It's a flat property. There is no ditch there. There is a, I forget the terminology, easement for drainage. If my property is a big property, I happened to be lucky and was able to buy a bigger property. It was made to divide into subdivision, and it's a Sanderling subdivision. There were supposed to be 5 houses, and if there were 5 houses built, then there is an easement for drainage. But the whole property is alone. There is no easement, there is no drainage, there is no drainage ditch. I feel sorry that they literally lied. There is no ditch there. I can take pictures. They have some pictures there in their file, which, imagine you build a wall 300 feet, you fill up with dirt to 6 feet. Where does the water grow? Water grows to the front. And from there, if they have made a drainage to go to their pond, great. But all that water comes to my property. They have a picture there after the hurricane. See, my property is all flooded from this 6-foot built fill with the wall so that the water all drains to the front. And in front of the wall, it comes to my property. I have videos where the water is pouring down when it is raining. So there is a huge drainage problem, which they said, oh, we are working on it. Since, again, as I told, from 2000 to 2000, now this is still not complete. There's no still drainage. All that water drains to my property. It's almost substantiating my claim. You can see one of the pictures they've submitted. My property is flooded with water after the rain just because they have raised it nearly 12 feet and they put a wall and all the water drains into it. And nowhere, I just saw a review by, in one of your recommendations that they have never approved that height of a wall anywhere in Merritt Island. There's no comparable variance that has been approved so far. It is one of the notations. I'm just requesting that this is unsightly. This has not been done anywhere else. When I talked to them nicely, there was that, oh, this is what we are going to do. We are going to get a variance. We know people, this kind of attitude and this is, we can build it and then go and show it and it'll happen. They probably can build a house in the Indian River and say, oh, we need no access, grant us access kind of attitude I got. I just feel that this is unsightly, this is causing problems in the neighborhood, and this should not be approved. And I'm the neighbor just north of it.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, thank you for coming in and sharing your feelings and your opposition. I know it's not easy to schedule time to do that, so I appreciate it. I have a couple questions. You said that the construction's been going on for about 3 years.
That's right.
Okay, and early in the construction stages, they brought in the fill.
That's right.
So for about 3 years, you knew the house was being built up.
Yes.
Higher than most houses.
Yes.
I'll agree with you that there may not be a ditch, but there's a swale in between the two properties. There is some sort of, I guess, if you can call it a ditch or what are they, swales? There's an indentation into the ground between the two properties.
Near the front of the property, there might be indentation. I don't know when you came, and you're more than welcome to come by. Okay. We have planted plants along the edge of the property. Mm-hmm. We don't plant in ditches. It's right on the flat ground. We have planted trees, plants right next to the wall, and even, there has not been a ditch. And the easement, as mentioned, was for the proposed subdivision. If there was a subdivision, then there would be an easement. There is no drainage easement. Then as you see in the photo, if you don't mind, in the one of the photos of after the EN, look at the amount of the flooding in my property, which never happened. I lived there since 2013, okay? All those 10 years, I had never had that kind of, just because they have built so much and all that water drained into my property.
So what stage is the construction at this point?
I think that probably is a question directed at the contractor. I don't know, it's been like that for.
What do you see? What's your?
Probably about 80% complete. Or
Is the roof on?
Yes.
So the house is already
85,
in
90%.
it's in
something
place.
like that,
It's in
yeah.
place, right? Okay. If we didn't grant this variance, and I know it's not your problem, but the wall would have to come down, the house would have to come down. I mean, do you have like a suggestion on how to resolve the problem?
Yeah, I don't think the wall has to come down. I'm sorry, I don't think the house has to come down. And the house was there. I mean, they built the wall well after the house was constructed. The house was there, and the wall came up only in November of 2021, I guess. This is 2023. Yeah, 2021, November, overnight. The house was built before that. The house was there existing, so I don't think the wall is essential. In fact, they come up with the explanation, oh, you don't want to see us, we are going to put chicken coop here, we're going to put cabanas here, that's why the wall will be nice. I mean, they were trying to sell us for the wall. And the wall also, extension of the wall, right across the garage, maybe a 20-foot wall, so that they can hold the fill. But it goes 306 feet, preventing us from looking anything on that to the river, towards the river, that kind of stuff. It's a visible obstruction. Now with another fence, it'll be obviously unsightly. I mean, obviously, eventually it's your decision, but I don't think, do I have a solution other than them building a maybe 20-foot wall next to the garage so they can climb up the garage? Because the house, I mean, that was a 5.4-acre property. They could have put the garage right in front of the house on the side, and they could have easily, there was no need to put it so close to the border that now they don't have a way to get into the garage.
Mm-hmm. I understand your issue, I do. The house was permitted, and it was built, per the permit, and, I don't.
Does how much they can raise, is there a limit by the county? Because compared to any of our neighboring properties, I mean, that's way and beyond. I don't know.
Right, that's outside the scope of this anyway, but, I'm trying to work with you, but I'm just trying to figure out what a solution could be
Right.
that could satisfy, you as a neighbor and the homeowner, and, so we'll go into some discussions in a minute, and maybe the three of us together can think of something.
The other major problem, I know I'll finish it, my time is limited, is because of the amount of the drainage. And they claim that, oh, we have a pond here. For the last 3 years, they haven't done zilch, nothing to cause the drainage. I mean, the drainage is happening now or yesterday or when the rainy season happened. The contractor hasn't done anything for the drainage. I can understand as 6 months or 8 months when a construction happens, there is going to be inconvenience for the neighbors. We put up with sounds, noises, dust. We are all okay with it. 8 months, 9 months, a year. This is started in 2020. We had every rainy season, we are having these issues. And they don't give, I mean, I don't want to use any, they don't give any, I mean, we requested something to be done. Oh, they're like, oh, it'll be done. Oh, we have the plans. Nothing. It's draining. We lost so many of our plants because of the flooding, because of there has not been adequate drainage.
Your property lies very low too, doesn't it?
Yeah, my property is low. At the flooding in the front, we have 3 ponds for that, okay?
There's 3 ponds and 3 different properties in a row.
No, these 3 ponds, this is the single property. It's a 10-acre property.
You have 3 ponds on your property?
Yes,
And
for the drainage.
both neighbors on both sides have a pond as well?
Yes. South neighbor has a pond. North neighbor is a subdivision, Egret's Cove.
And there's a pond there as well?
That's all pond belongs to me. I have 3 ponds. Yeah, maybe then.
So it's low-lying land with existing ponds.
That's right, that's right.
They're prior to the construction of the house next to you, there was a flooding issue in that area.
There was not the flooding issue that I have now.
Okay.
Yes, I agree. There was, I mean, Merritt Island has areas there are flooding issues, okay? We are lower lying than the property next north of us and to the front of us, okay? That's why there are, but exactly the photo shows. We have plants that were with us for years that died because of the flooding that happened after the southern property was raised 6 foot and a wall was built and the water was drained into our property.
Thank you.
Sir? And you did talk to them before they built the wall? Or
It
after?
came kind of overnight when they were building. They even told me, I don't know what's the relevance of it, oh, it'll be around the garage around 9 feet, then we will taper it off on either side to look nice. I mean, it was never done. It was just promised.
Sir? Was fill put under where the wall ended up going? Could you tell?
No, the wall is built on the outside of the fill.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
Thank you for your
Appreciate
time.
you coming in. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak in favor or opposition to this variance request? Seeing none, if you'd like to come back for final comment. Sir.
I can't speak to the emotional part of it. I can just speak to what the facts are. The facts are this house is only 3 feet higher on the finished floor elevation, based on surveys I've given you, than the house to the north. Okay, the elevation, we're on 3 feet difference. We are 2 feet below the road we front on, which is tropical. So it's not like this is astronomically different. As far as the flooding issue, we get a 300-foot wall there. It's not running through the wall. It's not draining to the wall. The wall is 55 feet from the edge of the water on the river. So it's not really blocking the view of the river because it's 55 feet back from the river before it even starts. So, and that's on the survey. It's not like this is something I'm just telling you. The property, we have pictures that we submitted showing you that there was a 5 to 6 foot difference of elevation of the fill before we touched the property. It's always been much higher from the day we started. So I have the owner here, if maybe she has a few things she wants to add.
Anything?
Well, I'm certainly not a liar. I think I've submitted pictures showing how dry my land is compared to his land. Before I built, I've owned the property about 10 years. And when we went after Hurricane Irma, my neighbor's property was flooded for a month. He's almost wetlands, I believe. Now, my property at South Tropical Trail is way high, and it comes downhill to the lake and then down to the river. What I did was put the fill in so I'm not as low as the lake. But I'm not extremely high. We're comparable. It's just he's got that ditch on the side.
Okay. One more question for you, Mr. Benzinger. You said you put a drainage tile in? Or you put a pipe in that drains the water?
No, that's to be put in.
Oh, it hasn't been put in yet?
Yeah, we haven't gotten that far. We're like 90% complete on the house, but until we get figured out what is going on with these walls, I can't finish.
Okay.
So that's why it hasn't progressed to that.
All right.
But I can guarantee you where the wall is, the water's not going through the wall.
Ask.
Pipe. Where's the pipe run from to?
The pipe on the drawing shows it on the south rear corner, so everything's going to drain toward the south, which is away from the neighborhood that you were talking about. And it collects into a drain pipe, a 6-inch pipe, and then it's taken due east, so it goes toward the pond in the front yard.
And so the front of the property from beyond your driveway that just shows open field going out to that pond.
It's just all open field,
It's
all pitched
just
toward the
drains.
pond.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a couple more questions as well. Only around the vicinity of the house is where the biggest issue is, because you have the grade up higher where the house is. So the wall itself, as it extends away from the house, either towards the road or towards the Indian River, you're going to have much higher wall. So are you planning on putting rail the entire way through, or just where it's needed?
Well, like I say, once the dirt drops below the top of the wall by 36 inches, then the railing's not needed.
Is your plan to put the railing there?
That's what we have drawn on there from the engineer.
Okay,
It
the reason I ask is if it's not needed at the end of the wall towards the river, which would then cause more obstruction for your neighbor, is there a reason to put the rail all the way down towards the river?
No, once we drop the dirt down below that 36 inches at the top, we are no longer required to put the railing on.
I was asking what your plan is.
That's what the drawing submitted from the engineer states.
But
And-
what is your plan with that wall, with that railing? Are you planning on going the whole length of the wall with the railing?
No, only where we have to put the
Okay.
railing.
Okay.
That's all we want, wherever we have to meet the code, that's all we're trying to do.
Do you need a 9-foot, 4-inch wall extended all the way towards the river when you really only need it to hold in the fill around the property, around the house?
You wanted,
Well, I'm looking at the Indian River, and I'm looking at berming to prevent my water from going in the Indian River and the Indian River coming in my pool. So in storms, we all know, everyone evacuate Merritt Island, we're having a 20-foot storm surge. That's why I'm trying to take all the precautions I can, is to keep my water in and that water out. So as you get closer to the river, there's going to be a swale. There's a couple of trees there. I'm going to do a bowl around them with coquina. That can collect water too, my water. And then the pipe reverting everything to the front. So as you going to the river, I think maybe a 20-foot span, you'll see the slope go down to the berm, if that makes sense.
It makes sense.
Okay.
What my concern is, in order to minimize any kind of potentially obstruction to your neighbor's view,
Right.
can we lower that wall as it gets closer to the water?
there's two 20-foot sections that we can start stepping it down. The last 40 feet, say, of the wall, which would give them, it's 55 feet from the river, then that's like 90 feet from the water. We can start stepping it down, the last 40 feet. But the reason why we're trying to hold it up is that she's got a cabana right there, and the cabana has to be protected. But after we get past that, then we can start letting it down. But right now, the cabana runs that whole north side of that same side of the house. So we have to protect that because she's going to have a drive and park in that section. But the last 40 feet, we might be able to do something with that to help the situation.
And I'm just thinking out loud, and I think that, may minimize the obstruction for the neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something we could really look at doing.
Okay.
As a contractor, I assume you know that the maximum height is 6 feet for a fence?
I was not aware that this first retaining wall that I put in at 6 feet.
Okay, because
Or at waiting height.
you've read me a whole bunch of codes, which you obviously have looked at the codes.
No, I've been a licensed general for over 40 years.
Have you ever built a fence?
I put up fences, well, I've had fence companies come in and put up fences, but
Okay.
but this is the first retaining wall that I've done.
And any of those fences, were you at 6 feet on those fences?
Yeah, I've seen them
Okay.
at fences, but I did not
And-
equate that with the retaining wall.
Okay, so the 6-foot height, even though you know it's there for a fence, you didn't think the retaining wall would be a 6-foot height?
No, because we figured we needed the 8 foot, had it drawn, and gave it to the county, and then got the drawing back approved at 8 feet without the rail, so no lights come on. But how you learn is when it comes back and says, no, you can't do this, you can do that. That's how you learn, but that didn't happen.
Right, but then you exceeded that 8 foot that you were even given permission for.
Well, it got past me. Let's
For
say
the
that.
sense
Yeah,
of this discussion.
Right.
Because I understand it never went to zoning, so technically it never really got approved, but
But the whole wall is.
you exceeded even that height that you had submitted. And if our previous questions, if I remember them correctly, and I'm just asking so I keep my mind straight here,
Right.
you didn't go back and resubmit and go, oh, I went to 9.3, so I need to do a change. You didn't do that change order, did you?
I submitted the new 9-foot 4 wall, yeah, because they asked me to.
Right, but that was after it got caught.
Yes.
Okay.
That was after the complaint. The complaint is
Correct.
what's actually,
But when you went to 9.3, you didn't go back to zoning and go, I exceeded 8 foot, I'm at 9.3, here's the new plans for
No,
9.3,
no.
until after somebody came by and said something about it.
no, it was only until, we didn't even know it was
Okay.
until, because it got past me too.
Okay.
The entire wall
All right.
isn't 9.4.
That's all I've got, guys. Anything, sir? All right, you may have a seat.
Thank you.
What is the code enforcement action?
I believe the code enforcement action is having a wall that exceeds the height requirements in the zoning code.
Okay. Gentlemen, your pleasure.
I think it's important that we discuss this a little bit further, and I'd like to make a motion to approve it. Let me start over. I'd like to make a motion to approve both variance requests as depicted in the survey.
I will second for the purposes of discussion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the variance request as depicted on survey. Discussions, gentlemen. And there's a lot.
I do, for the rest of the applicants, we got, I hope yours aren't going to go an hour. We don't plan on it on our end, at least. But I went to the property twice, 2 days in a row, because I really wanted to put a lot of time and effort and consideration into this. I think it's a unique situation. The house is, I should have asked it during the testimony, but this house has to be at least 7,000 square feet. It's a huge house. It's built up on a substantial amount of fill, which I don't have a problem with, because it's on the Indian River Lagoon, and I think, for flood purposes, I think it's appropriate to have the house built up like that. I also, the way the property is designed, it is a low-lying area. This piece of property is higher on the road and higher by the water. It's almost like a concave down piece of property. So it's going to collect water regardless. And where the house is built and how it's built, I think will protect the house from flooding. And then I don't see any other option than to have the retaining walls to hold that fill in and hold that property and that house in place. Without that wall, all that fill would spill over, and without the wall, the flooding situation would be a lot worse. The water would flow away from the house and immediately to the two properties to the side of the house, the north side and the south side, including then towards the front of the property where the ponds are, and I assume the ponds are there that helps collect the water. Like I said, it's a unique situation. For safety purposes, I absolutely think that wall needs to stay, and I think that the railing needs to go in where appropriate. But I'd like to see a situation in which we could taper that wall down as it extends towards the water to kind of alleviate any obstruction issues that the neighbors might be facing with having a 9-foot, 4-inch wall extended substantially towards the water where, for lack of better words, that's where the $1 million view is. So Personally, I want to approve both variance requests. I don't see any other option but to approve them. You can't take these walls down. I mean, the house is built, the fill is there, the property is designed, and there's nothing else you can do but maybe pretty them up or taper them down as you get a little bit further away from the house towards the water and towards the street.
Do you believe it needs to be the entire 9 foot, or would a 6 foot do?
If you look at the pictures where you can see the garage, this is the highest point of the wall, or this is the side that's 9 foot 4 inches. So there's a picture with a Jeep and the garages. You could see that it's still not even graded up to the slab of the garage yet. So they're still going to have to bring in some more fill for that, and then you can see the wall to the right. Once you bring that fill in, there's going to be very little left of that wall above ground. So I can't see taking any of the wall down, or you're going to have a problem with the property and also a problem with the drainage.
And when this picture was taken, it was at the 9 feet, you think?
That's exactly how it looked yesterday and the
Okay.
day before when I
Okay.
went there.
Any other comments, sir?
No.
Sir?
The aesthetics of the view of the wall is certainly of concern. But my greater concern is I did not get a real clear idea of what the precondition was for drainage and what the post-condition is for drainage. You know, I understand the wall and the channeling and the future construction is going to keep Miss Rice's water on Miss Rice's property. But if the water was draining onto her property from the other place before, and now it isn't, the other person needs to take care of the drainage on their own property. As long as her water isn't going over on him, the drainage issue has to be resolved. As long as she doesn't send water, storm water, to that north property. I don't know how we can caveat that. As long as the building code or the building permit has correctly compensated for that drainage issue, which I'm assuming it has, if it was properly designed and properly permitted, then the drainage issue should go away. But that is of a concern.
Question, and I assume I know the answer to this, but I'll ask anyway. When plans are submitted of this nature, and the drainage does come in play because of the fence, I assume drainage, especially being on the lagoon, drainage is taken into consideration, and they're having to show where the drainage is going to go, et cetera, correct, gentlemen?
Yes, they're supposed to have drainage plans that Natural Resources looks at. Also, Land Development looks at it for the lot drainage too. They have we have a reviewer that reviews that for that.
And that was done on this property, correct?
I'm sure it was included in the building permit. It's every building permit for a new single-family home has to go through those reviews.
Okay, sir. Thank you. I have really a couple issues, and they may be petty, but it's what's in my head, so I'll just state them. Now, he was approved for, well, I don't want to say approved because technically he wasn't because it didn't go to zoning, but he got plans back stamped approved and missed whatever for an 8-foot wall, but he ended up going 9 feet 3 inches. That bothers me. I know it's only 1 foot 3 inches. I understand that, but it's still 1 foot 3 inches. And as a contractor, we've got to know where we're building, how high we're building. There's generally a line you put across there so that you know where your height is. And obviously that wasn't done, or If that wasn't done, was it accidental or intentional? I don't know. That's the one thing that does bother me. I do have concerns, with the neighbor and his discussions. You took a good look at the properties where his house, garage, et cetera, are versus this fence. I'm getting a picture in my mind that his property's almost at the top of this fence by description.
His house sits further back towards the Indian River, so the houses aren't really side by side. They're little, the homeowner's house, the applicant's house is closer to the road,
Right.
and then the neighbor's house is closer to the water. I didn't do any measurements, but I don't know, there might be 30 yards between the property line and his house, but
Well,
that wall, I mean, that's a big wall. I know what he's looking at. He's looking at a wall.
But my question is, we're talking about we've got to do a railing anywhere along that property that there's not 3 feet from the top of the wall down to the property. So his property, the neighbor's property comes almost to the top of that wall? Did you notice that when you?
No, it's the applicant's property that comes to the top of that wall. That's what the rail is for. The neighbor would only see that rail when looking at the house and not looking towards the water,
Okay.
when looking at the neighbor's house where the rail is going to be needed.
Okay. That's my only comment. I'm just concerned the fact that we exceeded the height that we were supposed to have built the wall per plans. That does give me a concern, but that would be really my only concern at this point.
I'd be concerned with that too, and I am. But I think if the contractor made a mistake or didn't, do something appropriately, I don't think the homeowner should be punished for that. And I think the homeowner would take a substantial hit and substantial hardship because of that mistake. Let's call it a mistake. They missed it. If it was the contractor's home and he's the one we're dealing with, then maybe I'd feel differently. But I'm thinking about the homeowners, and I wouldn't expect her to know the 1.4 foot difference or the code and all that. She's relying on a
I
contractor.
don't think the homeowner would absorb the expense of that. It would be the contractor who made the error.
Well, and then I'm just going to take it one step further. I don't want to make a decision on the contractor's mistake that's going to put the homeowner in some substantial litigation.
Okay. Any other discussion, gentlemen? Yes, sir.
According to our hardship, we can't take economic things into account, but this is much higher economics than I think was anticipated. No,
And you are correct. Economics are not supposed to play a part in the decision that we make in regards to the hardship. But
So I agree with that, and I feel like she should have hired me. I'm just kidding, but it's more than just an economic. You're gonna be required to tear down a house that's built that is a substantially large house because you have to remove these walls.
you said that twice. Why would you have to tear the house down?
Because there's nothing else holding that fill-in. Those walls are holding the fill-in. And then that garage, where the garage is, your driveway goes right to that wall. So you take that wall out, there's nothing holding the property in but those walls.
Okay.
read your sex.
I'm going to go through the 6 criteria that everyone is given, and we'll do this as rapidly as possible. Then I'm going to suggest an amendment. But here we go. That special conditions and circumstances exist which are not applicable to other lands, structures, or buildings in the applicable zoning classification. I don't think in the beginning that special circumstances existed. I think they have been created by the fill, et cetera, that was brought in on the property. which does then create that, but all the properties across there are in the same situation. That special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. In the chair's opinion, the circumstances are created. Some of it is not, I'll give you that, but I think at this point it is, as Mr. McCann is saying, without the walls, the fill doesn't stay, so the fill is what's created the need for the walls. The question is, can you build the house without all of that fill? I don't know the answer to that, but in this case, that's where I'm at. That granting the variance request will not confer on the applicant any special privilege as denied by the provisions of this chapter that lands, buildings, or structures in the identical zoning classification. We would not be giving him any special consideration that is not given to any other person in this same situation. Number 4, that literal enforcement of the provision or chapter would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in identical zoning classification under provisions of this chapter and will constitute unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicants. When I talk about the unnecessary and undue hardship, I deal with what our definition of unnecessary and undue hardship is. I don't think it would deprive them of the ability to use the property. Maybe they could not have built what they've built, but it had to build something else, but it would not deprive them of the use of the property. And the hardship, again, is not one that financially we are able to take into consideration. Number 5, that variance granted is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. It is the minimum variance that would be required for them to come into approval from code and zoning. That the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of this chapter, and that such variance will not be injurious to the area involved, otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. That is such a hard question in this one because of drainage, because of the fill sliding away. And again, I'm just going by your statements. If that wall's not there, the neighbor's going to have a whole bunch of property, over on their property at some point. So is it injurious to the area? In some ways, it's not. In some ways, it's an advantage, but in other areas, it is injurious in that it could be viewed as an unsightly wall. So that is my 6 points, sir. You were going to say something?
No.
No.
Said you were going to do an amendment.
If you're going to do an approval on this, since you talked about it, do you want to add that it would need to be stepped down for the last X number of feet?
Do we have that authority to amend?
I would tell you that you have the ability to modify, to add special conditions as you see fit. But I would defer to the county attorney's office as well.
Yes, I agree that you can add conditions to your approval.
May I amend my motion, Chairman? I'd like to amend my, excuse me?
The amendment is?
I'd like to amend my motion to approve the 2 variance requests as depicted in the survey, with the exception that the wall between the north property and the subject property taper down starting after the cabana, which at the opinion of the contractor would be approximately the last 40 feet to provide a better view for the neighbor.
I don't know if that's a motion, but I'll
It is.
second the amendment.
We have a motion and a second in regards to the amendment, which brings us to the point of voting. And I'll be honest with you, I am so let's vote. All in favor of the motion and amendment as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And because of what's, I'm going to say no, but your motion does pass. Your variance is approved. Mr. Bodie, may we have the next, I'm sorry? May we have the next applicant requesting a variance?
Yes, item number 2, Brian Scott Hall and Kim Fischer request variance, Chapter 62, Article 6, Brevard County Code, Section 62-14335A4A, to permit a variance of 10 feet from the required 15-foot side east setback adjacent to a residential zoning for a building in a BU2 retail, warehousing, and wholesale commercial zoning classification, and this is located in District 1.
Would the applicant please come to the podium? Speak directly in the microphone. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon, Kim Fischer, 1614 White Dove Drive, Winter Springs, 32708.
And please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give this Board of Adjustments is the truth?
I do.
How may we help you?
Thank you for hearing the case. As a part owner of this property, along with my idiot brother, we are, we've got this commercial piece of property which next door is owned by City of Cocoa. They have a warehouse there that was built in the 50s, but it's still considered, it still has a residential zoning with a commercial future land use. The building is commercial, but as sometimes things happen when things are built in the 50s, the zoning has never been updated to reflect the future land use or to reflect the building that's actually there. So if the zoning were correct, next door, it would be commercial and our setback would be 5 feet. So we're asking for the 5-foot commercial to commercial setback instead of the residential setback.
Your property is currently residential?
No, our property is BU2,
Okay, that's what I thought.
and so we've got plans in right now for development for the warehouse,
Okay.
and this issue just came up.
I need to make a statement. You're in District 1, and Sonia Mallard is unable to be with us today. So and I got a little confused when you said you wanted commercial setback versus residential setback. Why?
Sure. So on our east is where we have our building, and we have it 5 foot from our property line, a 5-foot setback, which is commercial to commercial. But to our east property is City of Cocoa's commercial building that's existing, but somehow they still have a residential zoning. They have a future land use that's commercial, and it is a warehouse, but somehow it was built in 1950, but somehow it still has that zoning classification of residential, agricultural residential. The use is commercial, the future land use is also commercial. So a commercial property to a commercial property, the setback would be 5 feet.
So because the next door property is residential, they have to have the 15 feet?
Yes, whenever you have a commercial property, you get a 5-foot setback if it's budding commercial. Whenever it's
Okay.
budding a residential zoning classification, it requires 15 feet. Also, this plan that's on the survey was for the variance. It hasn't been site plan approved or anything.
Okay, sir. But it is a commercial building on that next property?
It is.
Okay.
Ugly as all get out.
Anything, sir?
I think you said your commercial building is 5 feet from the property line. It's not built yet.
No, we've submitted for review. It wasn't caught in the first cycle, and then when we did revisions, it was caught in the second cycle, so hence we're here.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Sir?
My question would be more procedural. Can we, in this motion, rezone the
No.
side property too? No? Okay.
No, that property is within the city.
No, it isn't. It's within the Brevard County, but it is owned by the City of Cocoa.
Oh.
But it does have a single-family agricultural residential zoning.
Is there any plans to revise
We're
that?
unaware of any plans to rezone that property. That would be up to the city of Cocoa,
Okay.
or maybe administratively done by the county commission.
I have no further questions. If you want to stand to the side for a minute. Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to speak in favor or opposition to this variance request? Seeing none, please come back to the podium. If you would, just stand to the side, ladies and gentlemen, until we see if anybody else is coming. If somebody else comes, you can be seated. Otherwise, just stay right there. Go ahead. Any further statements, ma'am?
No.
Okay. Then you may be seated. Thank you. Gentlemen, what's your pleasure?
I make a motion, we approve this variances as depicted on our paperwork here.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. Any discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. Let me read the 6 points. Let me get to them. Special conditions and circumstances exist which are not applicable to other land, structures, or buildings in the applicable zoning classification. The special circumstance would be that, in my opinion, the next door property is a commercial building, but sitting on a residential zoning. If it was otherwise, then this wouldn't be an issue. That the special conditions and circumstances do not result as the actions of the applicant. In my opinion, they do not. That granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by the provisions of this chapter of other lands, buildings, or structures in the identical zoning classification. We are giving her the same consideration that we would any other applicant in this same situation. The literal enforcement of this provision or chapter would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the identical zoning classification under provisions of this chapter and will constitute an unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. I don't know that that is necessarily so, that they could do a smaller structure or move it, the 15 feet if they needed to do so, but it wouldn't deprive them of the rights commonly enjoyed by other properties. That the variance granted is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Again, this is a thing where the minimum variance is for the purpose of the building that they're wanting to build and the location of what they're wanting to build. But it doesn't, if we denied it, it wouldn't keep them from any reasonable use of the land. It would just keep them from building the exact thing in the exact location they were wanting to build. That granting the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of this chapter, and as such, use variance will not be injurious to the area involved or otherwise detrimental to public welfare. Whereas the property next to them is a commercial building, I don't see that this would be injurious to the public welfare or any of the other situations there. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And your variance passes. I'm going to take a 3-minute recess so that we might use the facilities because that took so long, and then we will come right back, okay? Thank you very much.
As a comment.
order. If there's anyone out in the hallway, please come back in. We now call this meeting of the Board of Adjustments back to order. Mr. Bodie, may we have the next applicant that's requesting a variance?
Yes, item number 3, River Fly-In Condominium Incorporated, request variance to Chapter 62, Article 9, Brevard County Code, Section 62-3316EA2, to permit a variance of 131 square feet over the 24 square foot permitted for a wall sign in a multifamily development. Is located in a PUD, Planned Unit Development Zoning Classification, it's in District 2.
The applicant, please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Kim Rezanka. I'm with the law firm of Lacey Lyons Rezanka, 1290 US Highway 1, Rockledge, Florida.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give this Board of Adjustments is the truth?
I do.
And how may we help you?
I am here on behalf of River Fly-In Condominium. That is the owner of the building. Dr. Wasim Niazi is here as well. He is the principal of that company, and he's the one that has been working on this condominium since 2006. Just to give you a little bit of background, this was rezoned to PUD in 2006, and you can tell from the location map in your packet. It is south of Veterans Park in Merritt Island. It is at the very east end of Cone Road. It is adjacent to Brevard County Parks Maintenance. It's a government-managed land, which to the west of that is storage, to the north of that is storage, and to the south of all of this is the Merritt Island Airport, also known as Titusville-Cocoa Airport Authority property. So this particular parcel is 13.03 acres. The River Fly-In Condominium has also purchased the property to the east, which is the 15.47 acres. It's also zoned industrial, while the current property is PUD. A lot of it is wetlands. There's not much you can do with it, but he wanted to make sure he had the views, and also they're able to put some trails through there. So it's not intended to be developed with any housing, and it's only going to be for recreational and amenities. This is a 10-story building, 2 levels of parking, and 8 floors of condominiums with 112 units. It has a clubhouse, pool, and other recreational amenities. In 2002, we amended the binding development plan for this property to allow resort dwellings, which is permitted with conditions in PUD, but when the PUD was done in 2006, resort dwellings weren't that big of a deal, so we amended it to allow resort dwellings. I provided you a packet of information. The first page, well, the site plan that's been provided to you, it shows the sign, which is also reflected in your packet and on the first page of the packet. And it's hard to see, but about in the middle of the page, behind the circle, there's a little red line that goes up and down, north and south. That's where the sign's going. So it's facing Kemp Street, which is facing west, and this is the most south building, which I have some pictures to show you. But I did want to let you know also, too, based upon your sign codes, he has 227 feet of frontage. But that doesn't apply here because it's in a multifamily district, even though resort dwellings are a commercial use. So the part of the argument here is that the sign code for the county is antiquated and doesn't really fit with what this property is. So this is an unusual circumstance. On the first page of the stapled packet is the concept rendering of where the sign would go and the size of the sign, 155 square feet. Under section 62-1102 of Brevard County Code, resort dwellings is defined, and it defines resort dwelling as a commercial use. So while this is a PUD and a residential future land use, there's going to be commercial use here. And I think that's important because this is an unusual circumstance and a unique situation. Page 3 of the packet is sign code 62-3316, section A, which I've underlined. This is what would apply if it wasn't a multifamily project. and that would allow 2 feet per linear foot of building. The linear foot of the building is 227 feet. If you go to page 5, that's where section E12 is that we're asking for the variance from, and that is because E is particular to multifamily development. Because this is a PUD, it has been given certain waivers such as to height, because you normally wouldn't see a 93.7 foot tall condominium in Merritt Island. But the PUD allowed for that variance that was done back in 2006 through the PUD process, because most multifamily complexes in Brevard County are not that tall. And also because this is wall signs are treated as a freestanding sign, that's why this project is limited to 24 square feet. Going further to page 8, I took these pictures yesterday because I realized the aerials don't give this a full impact of the issues. This is looking from Kemp Street, which is the street immediately to the west of this project on, off of Cone Road. And that is looking into what is part of Pilot Lane, which is on the site plan. And that shows the 10-story buildings and the height. The problem is you can't see this building from any place that people would be looking to see it. And you actually, if you're coming from Courtney, if you're coming from 520, you won't be able to see a sign that's 24 square feet. That's why he's asking for 155 square feet. And it has a logo so people know Fly-In, it looks, there's a plane, people will know what that is. So this is what you see immediately next. When you go to Plamosa and Cone Road, which is just a little to the north, I'm not sure if Mr. Huffman and Mr. Rhodes are familiar with this area. There's an animal hospital straight in front of where I was taking the picture. And this is a quarter-mile away, and you can barely see the condo. When you go to page 9, at the top of the page, this is looking east. Where I was taking that picture, I went about 200 feet to the south, and that's a vacant storage lot. Took a picture right there. It's also 0.2. You can barely see the condominium. And then went a little further to the west and south. This is this is directly adjacent to the airport property on the south, and this is looking east from Azalea Avenue and Manor Drive, approximately half a mile away. And again, it's very difficult to see the condominium, although that tower is where the signage would be that you do see in that fourth picture. So the reason we're asking, again, for the variance from the sign code of 24 feet is 24 feet, you won't be able to see it. And the functions of signs are threefold. First is to identify where a business is located. Second is to promote the business, to convey messages and information about the company and the services. And the third function is to give a direction so people know where they're going. A 24-foot sign on a 10-story building at the end of an industrial park area does not function as a sign for this river Fly-In. No one will see it. It's useless. This is an unusual type of request for a variance. As mentioned, a PUD would allow you to get certain waivers. It doesn't allow a waiver from this article of the zoning code. So this would have had to come back. Could have done this a long time ago, but started in 2006, long time process, COVID hit, and now he's ready to open, actually. The occupancy should be available at the end of March. So this is not contrary to the public interest, and there are special conditions to this property. First, the location of the property and the existing uses around it. Again, there's industrial uses around it, there's an airport use, there's a park to the north. So no one's going to be impacted by this sign. The location of the property is unusual. This is not the result of the condominium, this is a result of the sign code because of the location of the property. The literal enforcement will result in unnecessary and undue hardship because the purpose of a sign is useless. Number 3, it does not confer a special privilege as other commercial uses are allowed this type of sign, and this is, resort dwelling is a commercial use. This isn't for the owners, this is for the commercial use of those who are using this as resort dwellings. 4, the literal enforcement deprives River Fly-In of its, I can't read my own writing.
Question for you real quick.
Yeah.
Are you just going over what we already have?
Yes.
Yeah, we've already got it.
Okay.
No offense.
Yeah.
It just speeds things up.
I know, but you're going to go through it again too, so I thought I'd at least.
So it'll kind of save me from having to.
I was hoping.
Okay, thank you.
So of its reasonable use, because other commercial uses are allowed this side of sign. This is the minimum variance to allow people. This was designed by a sign company, designed so people could see it. Again, it has the pretty logo, so people will see the fly-in portion of it. And this allows it to function for the purpose of a sign. And it's in harmony with the intent of the sign code and the LDR code to promote safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare under section 62-2 of the code. This is to promote quality and sustainable developments. And it also comports with the comprehensive plan future land use elements to ensure delivery of services that meets or exceeds levels of service, promote efficient uses of land. There is a policy 2.3 of the future land use element that deals with residential uses and commercial lands. And part of that deals with placement of signs to make sure the placement of signs is in the proper place. And it discusses unique features and resources which may constrain site development. And this location of this property is a unique feature and resources and does constrain the use of signs because it doesn't serve the functions of the sign code. With that, we would request the variance to 131 feet to the 24-foot allowed. And it's actually 623316E1A2.
Okay.
There's a 1 missing. Thank you. And Dr. Niazi is here if you have any questions for him.
All right, we'll deal with that in a minute. We are in District 2, Mr. McCann.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Sir?
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's a lot of words and a lot of text. Do you have this available to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Could you open to that? So I'm assuming your condominium, it's already built,
Yes, sir.
okay? And it's that V-shaped building.
Yes, sir.
What side of the building is the sign on?
It's on the south, it's facing Kemp Street, it's facing west
Facing,
on the south building.
okay.
So that's what the site plan was intended to show, but it's hard to see that little red line.
Yeah. And those buildings to the west, that whole plot of land is
That's owned
zoned
by Brevard County
GML?
Parks. That's the maintenance building for Brevard County Parks.
Okay. Then your parcel to the eastern half of that looks like greenery, wetlands. You alluded
Yes.
to that sometime in your,
Yes,
and you intend for that to stay preserved that way?
yes. They just bought this in October. Most of it is wetlands.
Okay. Okay. The parcel further east is zone
Industrial?
IU, and as well as the one to the south. So we can assume there will be no residential if it ever is developed.
Correct.
at
There's no
this zoning.
residential near here.
Okay. With the airport to the south and your signage facing west, why isn't there a sign facing south to the airport to tell people this is a airport amenity or whatever?
Well, I think, and I'm not a pilot, Dr. Niazi may be able to explain that, but this is also, it is to garner, because the planes fly around. I mean, it's not, and they do, the direction of the flight, I believe people coming in from the west will see it, but this is also directional for people coming from 520 and coming from Courtney.
And 520 is to the north of your
520 is
property?
north, and Courtney Parkway is to the west.
Okay. Okay.
Where is this thing going? I'm
The,
confused.
the sign is going here on this west wall.
If you look at the
Okay,
pictures in
I
that.
got you.
Yeah.
I got you. I don't have any questions.
Yeah, move
If-
to discuss, but
If you'll stand to the side for a moment, please. Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to speak in favor or opposition to this variance request? Seeing none, please return. Any final comments?
No, sir.
All right, you may be seated.
Thank you.
What is your pleasure, gentlemen?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance request as depicted on the survey.
I'm going to make a change to that. If you'll look They asked us to make the motion as depicted on the concept drawing 2A. It's on the bottom of the, this thing.
I'll change my motion. I make a motion to approve the variance request as depicted on the concept drawing 2A provided by the applicant with a date of September 9, 2022.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
I'm very familiar with this area. I live pretty close to it. I drive by it probably every day. It's a very nice condo building you constructed there, and I wish you luck. It improves the neighborhood. It's very industrial back in that area by the airport. And I agree, a 4x6 sign would serve no purpose at all. And you're asking for a wall sign, so that's the furthest you can get away from the street. That's giving you the greatest buffer. You're 10 stories up, and I think it's an appropriate request.
Yeah, I agree. As long as there's no residential development or anything in that area, it's certainly all commercial, industrial, zone for that as well. If anything happens in the future there, this is completely appropriate.
All right. Let me do our 6 points. That special conditions and circumstances exist which are not applicable to other land structures or buildings in the applicable zoning classification. If I heard what you said right, you had it rezoned to pub? Okay. Because of that, it changes what the conditions are in regard to the sign. So in that case, it may be a little bit different, but it would not be any different than what would be in any other PUD development. So let me make that clear. That special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. Where the building is being constructed is a commercial area that is not something that they created. And in order to be visible, there has to be some way for them to get their visibility out. That granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege as denied by the provisions of this chapter of other lands, buildings, or structures in identical zoning classification. Again, we are not giving any special privileges. We are considering this as we would any other application of this nature brought before us. Number 4, the literal enforcement of the provision of this chapter would deprive the applicant of the rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the identical zoning classification under the provisions of the chapter and will constitute unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. Some of these questions are kind of difficult to answer, and so here's the way I'm going to answer this. If we denied it, it wouldn't deprive them of what everybody else in a PUD is required to do. But I think there are special circumstances here in that they're needing to be seen above and around commercial property, and without proper signage, nobody's going to know they're there. So in that case, I think it would create an unnecessary and undue hardship. That the variance granted is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Again, that is not necessarily the case. They could put up a, I think you said a 6 by, how far?
Oh, I calculated 4 by 6 for
A 4 by
24 square
6
feet.
sign, but it would not be a visible sign, but it would not keep them from any reasonable use of the land, building, or structure if we said no to the signage. That the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of this chapter, and that such variance will not be injurious to the area involved or otherwise detrimental to public welfare. I'm not sure that the PUD designation was designed for the purpose of keeping you from putting up a sign. It's certainly, I don't think, in my opinion, that it will be injurious to the area. As Mr. McKenna said, the structure has improved the area, and certainly the signage will be advantageous, and I don't think it would be injurious to the area at all, as there is no residential that this sign is going to disrupt. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And your variance passes. Mr. Bodie, may we have the next applicant requesting a variance, please?
Yes, item number 4, Curtis William Charles Pacleb and Christina M. Bakken-Pacleb request variance to Chapter 62, Article 6, Brevard County Code, Section 62-1446D3A to permit a variance of 2.7 feet from the required 20-foot rear setback for a principal structure in a PUD planned unit development zoning classification. Property is located in District 4.
Hello, sir. To the microphone, please.
Yes, sir.
And your name and address for the record,
My name's John Lowman. My home address,
please.
3900 Lowman Lane, Melbourne 32934.
Please raise your right hand.
Yes, sir.
Do you swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give this Board of Adjustments is the truth?
Yes, sir.
And how may we help you?
We're requesting a minimum of a 2.7 feet setback from the rear of the property line. The home was built inside 2.75 feet inside of a 20-foot setback, bordering a retention pond on the property. And I do want to note it's 0.7 feet past a administrative variance is what we're looking for.
Okay. You're in District 4, which is Mr. Bavell. He's unable to be with us today. So just a quick question. The permit was issued with the 20-foot setback,
That's correct.
but somehow you encroached in that by 2.7 feet.
Yes, sir. We hired a professional surveyor. We also noted, actually in a highlighted email to the said surveyor, to make sure that when we're laying this out, that we're 20 feet from the rear setback. It's not very clear where it is for us to visually see it. If you look at the property in the aerials, the water's in and out. It's a curved retention pond. It's not extremely straightforward. It doesn't borderline somebody else's property to come across. And we hired him. He pinned the corners for us. We measured the corners from the house. Everything looked right on our end, from the plan to the pinned corners, and we built it there accordingly.
Okay. Question for my clarification, please. The back is the area toward the river, correct?
Yes, that's the rear property line. It's not a river, it's like a retaining pond.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Retention pond.
Yes.
My question, where does the measurement come from? Because I know in a lot of these situations when we're dealing with the river, we're dealing with canals, et cetera, that has a tendency to change?
No, this doesn't change. This is a platted lot, and it
Okay.
has a platted rear property line,
Okay,
even though the water line may vary from the retention pond, may go up and down.
so I'm assuming the structure is already built, is that not correct?
Well, it got triggered in construction. It's triggered a lot of times if it's a masonry. It's probably too much information, but it's a masonry. It gets triggered early because you need a tie beam inspection. In this case, it's a frame construction. So we were able to get through framing trades, dry-in, windows, doors. We're looking for our electrical, our mechanical, our frame all, our dry-in. The full inspection. So the house is completely tore up because it's an addition. So it's not just even a standalone structure. The roof lines changed. The windows of the existing house were taken out.
But the addition is there, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, that's what I was asking.
Yeah, big time.
And you're stating that the surveyor made an error in his...
Correct. He was derelict in his duties to not only be told to make sure we hit that and before he laid it out with a plot plan, but also he pinned it inside the setback. So when we got our foundation survey that needs to be done prior to those inspections, that was the first showing that we were 2.7 feet.
Was that the same surveyor?
It is.
So he came in and originally told you where you could put it,
He pinned it, yes, sir.
but then once you built it, he came back and said,
Did a foundation survey, and we were encroached on the setback that we told him make sure we don't encroach on.
did you go into an area outside of where he said you could build?
Negative. Nope, exactly where he said to go.
Do you mind if I ask what his statement was in regards to your encroachment?
He said he
since
built it, he laid it out per plan. Didn't care.
But he knew you're supposed to have a 20-foot setback?
100%, it's in writing in an email provided, highlighted to him prior to even starting the job, because a comment came back from the city, and we acknowledged it and said, hey, surveyor, make sure we hit this make sure we're hitting this when we go.
So he knew it, but then.
He knew it, then when he sent his field guys in, he laid it out per plan.
Didn't do it
And-
because
and we
he
checked
said,
for-
this is your plans.
Yep, that's exactly what he said. He didn't care at
All
all. He didn't even pay for the fee to do the variance.
As a realtor, let me just tell you, I love dealing with
Yeah.
people like that, and that is sarcasm.
And of course, the homeowners are abhorred, and they're very kind, but they're, the job's obviously stopped. Wow. Yep.
Okay. Gentlemen?
I've been cautioned not to read too much into. I've been cautioned not to read too much into aerial photographs by our staff, but I am looking at the aerial photograph. Do you have it there?
I'm sure I do. Somewhere. This one right here?
Close enough.
Okay.
So I can see on this that there is the property line. Behind the property is a strip of ground that goes down to the pond.
Mhm.
There's a line on there, a dark line. Is that the edge of is that like the high water mark, or is there a footpath or something there that people use?
It's just like a small bank. It's just
Okay.
it's a really shallow retention pond. So it
Okay.
doesn't like drop off. It's just a line of where the water probably was or close to it that day, I'm assuming.
Okay.
But there's
And-
no walk path. There's no way to get from, you don't go behind people's property there. Is that
So
what you're
it's,
asking?
it's not a recreational?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
no.
Okay.
These are private lots. You could probably.
Belongs to the homeowners association,
Yeah, I guess.
probably, whoever owns the pond.
Yeah.
There's a white box there. Is that a dock or
Yeah, there's a
something
little
that
dock
you-
out there. So you see their pool structure. Obviously, this is pre-addition, but you'll see
Mm-hmm.
the pool structure, and that's a little dock. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, it is.
all right.
And if you look at the survey, it's not like a straight line across. If you looked at the survey we provided, you see what it is. It's not like we could pull 2 points and, get exact. There's not even a marker on the one side, but
You did mention somewhere in the description that there is a bit of an arc to the,
there is. You can see
and
it.
it indents towards your house, so that even
Yes.
if you did the corners,
It indents on that side too. It
Okay.
appears.
Mr. McCann?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Is your addition inside the screening pool area?
No, sir. To my understanding, again, I didn't have it surveyed, but it shows on the survey. I think there's a 10-foot setback for an accessory, like a pool
Okay.
cage. So mine's well inside that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're inside the pool structure.
I would be towards
Property
the
line,
road.
correct.
By a long shot from the
Okay.
pool structure.
Okay.
Pools and pool screen enclosures have different setbacks.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would assume they're 10 foot, and I'm 17 foot 3 inches.
Yeah, I understood that. Thank you. I did understand that. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't
No, we definitely didn't go
beyond
yeah.
that, and I didn't think we were,
No,
so I
sir.
just wanted to make that as a point. I don't have any further questions. If you'd like to stand to the side for a moment. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak in favor or opposition to this variance request? And seeing nobody jump up and run, come on over back. Any final statements, sir?
No, sir.
Gentlemen, what's your pleasure? You may be seated, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we approve the variance as depicted here with the 2.7-foot variance on the 20-foot required setback.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion before I read the 6 points? Sir?
Any encroachment that you would have on the setback or the requirements is more than violated by the pool cage. And with the curvature of the back property line, that's a pretty forgivable mistake. And the fact that there is no one really abutting the back or wandering back there, it's not going to affect their use or pleasure of that small strip of land.
Anything, sir?
No.
All right. Let's do the 6. The special conditions and circumstances exist which are not applicable to other land structures or buildings in the applicable zoning classification. There are no special circumstances that exist. or special conditions that exist. That special conditions, circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. Again, there are no special conditions or circumstances in regard to this property other than the fact that the surveyor didn't survey correctly. The granting the variance request will not confer on the applicant any special privilege as denied by the provisions of this chapter of other lands, buildings, or structures in the identical zoning classification. We are not giving them any special privilege as we are entertaining this motion as we would any other applicant that comes before us. That literal enforcement of the provision of this chapter would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the identical zoning classification under the provisions of the chapter and will constitute unnecessary and undue hardship to the applicant. Since now we're getting into this where financial doesn't matter, but since you've already constructed it, and in my opinion, thought that you were doing the right thing, I believe it would create an unnecessary and undue hardship for you to have to take that out and move it 2.7 feet. That the variance granted as minimum variance will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. In this case, it is the minimum variance required for the structure that they have put in place. That the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of this chapter, and that such use variance will not be injurious to the area involved or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. As was stated by Mr. Huffman, it is inside the pool screen enclosure, so it doesn't encroach on being closer to the pond or any other areas behind it that would cause any damage. So we do not see this as being injurious to the area nor to the public welfare. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the variance as depicted on survey, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. And your variance passes. Mr. Bodie, may we have the next applicant that is requesting a variance?
Yes, item number 5, Jamie and Heidi Nemeth request variance of Chapter 62, Article 6, Brevard County Code, Section 62-1334-5C3 to permit a variance of 0.25 feet from the required 50-foot rear setback for a barn in an AU agricultural residential zoning classification located in District 1.
If you speak into the microphone, your name and address for the record, please.
Jamie Nemeth, 110 Nitty Avenue, Titusville.
Ma'am, if you'll step over to the microphone.
Heidi Nemeth, 110 Nitty Avenue, Titusville.
If both of you please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give this Board of Adjustments is the truth?
Yes.
How may we help you?
As he said, we're here to get a variance on a setback. We have, the building's already up. The east back corner is 3 inches inside of the 50-foot mark. I'm not putting blame on anybody. I put the stakes out and I put the fill dirt in, so it's possible that I moved something over when we were squaring everything up. But at the end of the day, the corner of the building is 49 foot 7.5 inches. And we originally was, asking about an accessory building just so that we could put our lawnmower and stuff in, because we've been, in the summertime, we had to drive back weekly to cut the grass. And because we don't have a house on the property, we had to call it a barn, and that's, so once the house is on there, then this isn't going to be an issue, or, because then it's the 15-foot setback then. But there is no house on the property, so it's 50 foot is what it is.
If he had a house on the property, what would the setback be?
The setbacks to the house or to an accessory structure?
For an accessory structure from the property line?
Yeah. The barns require 50 feet off the side and rear. An accessory structure would require 15 feet off the side and rear and behind the front building line of the house.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add, typically this minutia of a variance would typically go through administrative approval process because it falls under the 10%. Since the property is adjacent to state-owned lands, it's nearly impossible to get them to sign off on it, and that's why we're here today.
Okay. You're in District 1, and Sonia is not here, so gentlemen, I'll open it up. Who has questions?
I just want to put this in perspective. for everybody. 50 feet is about maybe 2/3 of the way back to the back wall. 3 inches is about the length of my thumb. So any practical reason for the 50 feet, it's more regulatory and code than it is street-wise.
Well, the 50 feet comes from the ability to have farm animals, and that's the reason for the additional setback.
As you said before, though, this is so de minimis that it would be a administrative thing.
If it helps, if I add something, I called the survey guy back out because I had measured it and it was 50 foot 1/2 inch. And it is, if you string a line down the side of the building where it crosses the property line, but he told me, and I did not know this, that he is required to measure on a 90-degree, which the back line is on an angle, and that cuts across the corner of the building, but,
Sure.
so,
And you do intend to build a house there at some point?
yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Stand to the side for just a moment. Anyone here like to speak in favor or opposition to this variance request? I was waiting for you to run up. Come on back, please. We did receive a letter of objection. Have you seen this letter?
We did see it.
Okay. Just want to make sure you have seen it and that you're aware of what it says. All right, any final statements?
No, sir.
All right, you may have a seat.
I do have one final
Wait a
question.
minute, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. And it only came up because I've read this opposition. Do you intend to put farm animals in this? What will future be an accessory?
Maybe chickens, that's it. I mean, because on that size property, you're not allowed to have anything really of
So
one or two,
at some point, you may have animals in it.
maybe.
Okay.
But the property is,
She's to the east, and it's 52.05 to the property line to the east, so it meets the code.
right,
Yes, the lady that complained, so,
and it is an agricultural,
yes,
so he can have animals.
yes.
So, doesn't make a difference. All right, thank you. You may have a seat. Gentlemen, your pleasure.
I'll make a motion that we approve a 3-inch on 50-foot setback approval for this property.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, gentlemen?
I already did.
I think we've pretty much covered it. Let me do
I'd
our
like to
six.
discuss something.
Yes, sir,
real
I'm
quick.
sorry, my apologies.
No, I'm sorry. I just, I do want to give the person who sent the letter of objection just, a little bit of attention. I understand that, they're not happy with what could happen years down the road, and I get that, but we're only asking for 3 inches. I don't think that would make much of a difference, and it's hard to speculate years down the road. I'm not swayed by it, but I have considered it.
Yes, and I think we do. What I'm looking at is it doesn't matter if he's within the 3 inches, he can still put animals on it, which is what her big objection is. So it wouldn't matter whether we approve this or not. He would take 3 inches off the side of the barn, he can still have animals, so.
Any detriment is going to float well past that 49.75 feet as opposed to the 50, so.
All right. Anything else before I go to the 6 points, guys? Here we go. That special conditions and circumstances exist which are not applicable to other land structures or buildings in the applicable zoning classification. There's no special conditions or circumstances that exist in this particular situation. That special conditions and circumstances do not result of the actions of the applicant. Again, we're 3 inches off due to an administrative error or due to a zoning, or not zoning, but a survey error. If you want to say that, that's because of the applicant, then I think we could do that. The granting of the variance will not confer on the applicant any special privileges denied by the provisions of this chapter of other lands, buildings, or structures in the identical zoning classification, and we do not, he is not getting any special privilege. We would consider any request of this nature as we are doing here. The literal enforcement of this provision of this chapter would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the identical zoning classification under the provision of the chapter and will constitute unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. Again, if this was more than 3 inches, it might be an issue, but it is 3 inches, and I think it would create a very much unnecessary and undue hardship for us to make him have to take 3 inches off of a barn. That the variance granted is the minimum variance that will make possible reasonable use of land, building, or structure. It is the minimum variance required for the barn to be approved. That the granting of the variance be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of this chapter, and that such a variance will not be injurious to the area involved, or otherwise detrimental to public welfare. And I'll just state this. If he had a house there, he could build considerably closer. So I don't see how it would be injurious to any area involved. We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And your variance is approved. Before we dismiss, Mr. McCann, I inadvertently called you Mr. Hartman at the start of this. Please forgive me for that. My error, I just looked down at my paper and my eyes didn't catch, so I apologize for that, sir.
No worries.
All right, that is our last case, so we stand adjourned.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.